I was just talking about the flag behind you. Do you want to tell everybody the symbolism of that?
Yes, it's a Russian standard flag. The standard Russian flag is white, blue, and red. But red symbolizes blood. So this flag is the Russian flag without blood. Uh, that's kind of the idea that one of our activists got at the beginning of the war. And then it appeared very symbolically, but that was not what she was thinking when she actually came to this idea. It appears that it's an ancient flag of Novgorod Republic. And Novgorod region in Russia is famous for being main alternative to Moscow. Moscow is centralized power, and at the time of Ivan the Terrible, Ivan decided to destroy Novgorod, where it was direct democracy.
Mm,
And that's the cradle of Russian model of democracy. And well, that's why it's very symbolic that we are trying now to trace our past, not to centralized autocratic Russia, but to ancient democracy of Novgorod. That's the idea.
I know I find myself saying this every week, but you've written a book about this.
that's that's correct, and it's finally released. In a very symbolic day when the Crimean Bridge was blown. Yes.
Yeah. So, so let's talk about that. Mr. Putin had a birthday. He got a slightly delayed birthday present. Do you want to tell us what you know about the blowing up of the Crimea Bridge?
As Vladimir Putin would have said, it collapsed. So
Certainly
that's
did.
no. Seriously speaking, obviously it was an attack. The attack was carried. I would put it diplomatically, at least with a truck, um, because to my knowledge, just a truck would not be enough for the bridge to collapse, because anybody can try, can try this. I'm not encouraging you guys to do this, but theoretically you can try.
But if you
Uh,
are in Russia and you do have a truck full of explosives, we're not
yes, you can
discouraging
try
you
to.
either.
Yeah, yeah, you can try to blow it, and it would not destroy the bridge, because the explosion would go up.
Mhm.
And so to make it efficient, well, firstly, it has to be some um, special treatment of the explosive, of the explosives. But at the same time, I think it should be something in the bridge itself. So I don't know the complete picture. I know just a part of the picture with a truck, because it was Russians who were procuring the cargo, which was imported from Bulgaria into Georgia, across the Black Sea. Then it was getting across the border into Russia. And then it was a cargo company which was doing shipments to Crimea. As you understand, not all of the cargo companies would do this, because Crimea is an illegally annexed land, unrecognized. That's why it's prohibited by international regulations to ship anything into Crimea. But obviously, some people, they don't care. Those who work inside Russia, they assume that it's part of Russian territory. And one of these companies was just hired with a truck. This truck was loaded with what appeared later to be explosives, and it was supposed to get to Crimea on the 7th. The contract was on the 7th, but the guy who was the driver decided that he had some like family event or something like that. So for certain reason, he decided to go the next day, not the day when he was supposed to go. like a usual Russian story. That's why he went the next day, and it blew up not on the 7th as we all expected, but on the 8th.
So Jasper asks a question. Did someone sacrifice their life to drive the truck? Do you know that?
No, the driver died in the explosion, but he didn't know there were explosives in the truck. Again, mm, uh, the organizers of this, they hired people who were violating the law and were supporting the war by supporting this illegal annexation by shipping goods onto the annexed territory. But obviously, the guy didn't know what was in the truck.
I realize I stopped following the thread on this, and I'm suspecting because of all the follow up conversations and the bombings in Ukraine and such, others have as well. Has anyone taken responsibility for the bombing of the bridge?
No, no, nobody.
Does that surprise you?
Not so much. Again, mm, uh, Ukrainian security, which was obviously, to my mind, involved in this, there's always denying responsibility. That's like all the security forces in all parts of the world usually do. And those people in Russia whom I know who were assisting in this, mm, they obviously are also not taking their responsibility because it was not something that they organized altogether. So one thing is like assisting in doing things,
Mhm.
another thing is in the organization.
And just to clarify what you said about Ukraine, and I'm bringing this up for a couple of reasons, including there was that article, I think in the Times or the Post last week. The U.S. believes Ukraine was involved in the assassination of Daria Dugina. Um, are you suggesting that someone inside or a group inside of Russia planned and carried out the mission? The Ukrainians were aware of it, or do you think the Ukrainians might have had more involvement than just awareness?
Oh, I would say that obviously Ukrainians were aware about something going on in this direction.
Yeah.
Because I was aware, and I'm obviously informing Ukrainian authorities and military command because I'm part of it. And we are like transparent in what we do because it is the war, and it's not good when certain people would do something totally unexpected for others. Yeah, and it's normal, and that's how it should be done. When you are coordinating and you are informing, and whatever. But at the same time, there is a difference between Ukrainian security uh, being behind this, organizing this, guiding this, planning this, ordering this. I don't know, like any other in any other means, being directly involved and being informed that something would happen. So yeah, they were informed, not to a great level of details, but obviously they didn't take part of it. And I would say more that the U.S. security were also informed about what's going on, but they certain part of them, they want to substantiate themselves. And I think it was this leak, this release of information through New York Times was organized because there is a certain pressure and heat which is associated with the attack on Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2,
Yeah.
where Russian Federation and Putin personally blamed Americans and British being involved in this attack, and they all are saying, "No, it's not us," and they say, our position that we are not involved in any kind of attacks on Russian territory. That's the position which U.S. government is promoting all the time. There are a lot of threats that if you guys would turn to use of the weapons of the mass destruction, then we will start doing things on the Russian territory. But before this, we are not involved. And that's why, to illustrate this, I think that's where those leaks, are coming.
Yeah. Yeah. So the elephant in the room, of course, this week is nukes. Everyone's talking about it. The president of France just proved he's a terrible poker player, in my opinion. He just showed his hand. I don't know if you saw it. I'm assuming you did. Uh, what I want to get to is our discussion of nukes, really your discussion of nukes in the book, because you proposed something of all the things I read while working on this book with you. It was one of the most fascinating and dramatic. So we're going to get to that. But first, I want you to talk about your view of Putin's threats, how the world is responding, why Macron, others, what's your take on this whole collective conversation around the world about nukes, thanks to Vladimir Putin?
I obviously take this as a bluff. And I think that Putin is just trying to blackmail the world, and he is using all the possible means to initiate the peace talks with Zelensky, because this is something that he badly needs because he is losing at the field of war, and he wants to somehow freeze the situation at the current positions. And everything that he does is targeted to this. He essentially sacrificed Armenia to Azerbaijan and to Turks, to Erdogan, to persuade Erdogan to talk to Zelensky, to try to persuade him to start talking to Putin. They initiated, obviously, there was certain communication with Elon Musk to make sure that Musk, says something about this and also would call for peace talks. I think it was an indirect communication. And I think it was done through a certain part of Trump establishment, because that happened the next day after Musk was meeting with Trump. And I think that is where this idea was coming from. I highly doubt that Musk talked to Putin directly, but I think that there was a certain information exchange which made the US media suggest that they actually discussed this peace plan before. I think that they were just taking for a literal value what was, a metaphorical thing that, yes, they communicated, but not directly. And Musk already denied any direct contacts with Vladimir Putin. Like that, everything is targeted to this idea, and with nukes is absolutely the same. But if you guys don't start talking to me, beware, I may do something nasty. But you see, still, the position of United States and all other Western leaders is that Putin could be already a pariah, and somebody like Kim Jong-un, but United States is not doing assassination of foreign leaders.
Yeah.
And even if he is a pariah and even if nobody likes him, still he is the leader of a foreign state. But in case he is using any of the weapons of the mass destruction, then he would be not just a legitimate target. It would be, just out of global security to physically eliminate him as soon as possible, as it was with Bin Laden, and with others. He would be a global terrorist.
Yeah.
And the global threat. And I think that Putin understands that this is the line he shouldn't cross, because his security would be questioned very much.
So I always make the assumption that the more I'm not going to say the more he talks about nukes, because I think he's going to talk, but the more the world takes him seriously, or people around him take him seriously, the danger for him just within his inner circle, I would imagine, increases because though I'm speculating here that those around him are going to begin to think maybe he's really going to do it and I need to kill him before he pushes the button. Do you think that there's
Uh,
some elements to that?
no, you're right. I think you're right. And it's not just the inner circle, it's in general Russian population. Sociological polls suggest that the level of insecurity among ordinary Russians increased dramatically. And it's partially linked with the fears of being drafted, but very seriously, it's because they fear of a nuclear war with the West. And obviously, that doesn't work for Putin because what he was selling to the general public all these years was stability and security.
Yeah.
And like maybe it's not prosperity, and my people are still in everything, but at the same time, it's stability and security, something that they missed in the 90s. And right now, there is no prosperity, there is no stability, there is no security. And he personally is the source of instability and insecurity. That's why, yeah, it works against him. But I think that he is here, firstly, is selecting out of two evils what he thinks is a lesser evil. Secondly, he is racing against time. These, revolutionary moods in among Russians, they would grow, but it's not, a one moment thing. So they are growing. But Putin hopes that during this time he will be able to claim a certain victory in the field of war, maybe militarily, maybe through these peace talks, maybe somebody else, maybe the Western coalition would collapse, maybe it would be because of energy supplies to Europe, which are getting more and more expensive. Maybe this, maybe that. He is trying to pull all these tricks possible to achieve his objective.
Or as we say in the United States, he's throwing a lot of shit on the wall and hoping something sticks.
That's correct. That's correct.
Yeah. You, well, let's talk about what Macron said today. And if you think it has any impact, will other leaders follow in his footsteps, or will he just meet condemnation and go away and hide?
Um, in Russian there is a joke. I don't know if it exists in English about an invincible jaw. And when two people meet each other and they're looking at the guy on the street, who is that? That's an invincible jaw. And why he is so invincible? Because nobody wants him.
Hmm.
And that's about Macron. I I wouldn't say that anybody was really thinking about French using their nukes on Russia. It was obviously, a debate between Russia and the United States, at best between Russia and Great Britain, but most likely between Russia and the United States. But
Yes.
Macron decided to remind that he is still a great nuclear power. And I say, we are not planning to use nukes. Okay, that was a reminder because nobody expected him to.
Yes. Yes. So it was actually about him and his ego or his national French pride more than what's happening in the world between Russia and the rest of the world.
Yeah, absolutely. But unfortunately, that reflects very much the general attitude of Europeans. Want to stick out. They want to go to business as usual as soon as possible. They
Yes.
theoretically understand that they probably that would not happen, but still, this is something that they want. And they want this to end somehow. They don't
Yes.
care whether it would be a peace treaty, whether it was something else. They want to persuade Zelensky to do something about this. They have to be tough on Putin, but obviously, all their hopes is that at the end of the day, Ukrainians would negotiate peace.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. I want to get to what you talk about in the book about your solution for dealing with nukes more effectively? I'm assume you know what I'm talking about when I bring that up. Um, One of the things you say in the book, and I'm just going to read it here: nuclear weapons are a means of collective defense of all mankind, not individual countries. That's about one of the most shocking things I've read in a long time. And once I read your rationale, I thought to myself, damn, that's ballsy and brilliant at the same time. I want to hear you talk about it instead of me describing it. What's the thought and the philosophy behind that?
Yeah, that's my fundamental belief. Because there would be always a room for an accident if this kind of weapons is in the hands of one individual country. And at the end of the day, from the very beginning, the nuclear weapons, they were the weapons of containment, not the weapons of assault.
Mhm.
The humanity saw what happens when it's been used as an assault tool during bombardment of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And I think that nobody wants to repeat this kind of experience. And I think that's more or less a common position of everybody on this planet. And that's why I think that that's actually the most optimal solution for the problem of denuclearization of Russia. But this is something that would be fair for everyone, and that should relate not just to Russia, but the aforementioned French and Americans and British and everybody. Um, there are global alliances, which is already a collective power. And it's a collective defensive power, as it should be, you know. And in this situation, why not create the policy of two keys? Even in Russia right now, it's not like in US, by the way. In United States, the nuclear keys are in the hands of the president himself. In Russia, there are two keys.
Mm.
One in the hands of the president, another is in the hands of Minister of Defense. And that's a tradition from Soviet times, when everybody was afraid of Khrushchev and him being a very impulsive person. At that time, they created this two keys solution that Politburo would control.
Mm.
You know, that nobody can make a unilateral decision on the application of the nuclear force. And they just like carried on like this into modern day Russia. So I think why not put it as a solution above national level, and let us have one key in the hands of the alliance, and another key is in the hands of an individual state. In this situation, you know, if we need to apply this as a matter of collective defense of all members of the defense alliance, then there will be no problem. So the country, from one side, feels like it controls the arsenal on its territory, and theoretically it can break with an alliance. Theoretically, they are still physically the arsenal is on its territory, but it cannot happen out of impulse. There would be a lot of checks and balances that would prevent the country from doing so, and it's a certain process. So I think that's the solution that we can use in the case of Russia.
Do you think all nations with nukes would agree to that?
I think no, but we should fight for it. No,
Mhm.
look, there's. I think, as you correctly said, I also take it as a bold move.
Mhm.
Um, right now, it can be a very reasonable compromise, and that's how this particular war may end, without something like that dramatic for Russians. and creating a revolt within Russian elites, which would be against this. And Russian people will also see it as a shield, which was created by all of Russians during very critical period of history. But at the same time, that makes the situation safe for everyone. But then we will have a moral authority to push for everyone to follow the suit. And I think this is a kind of decision that we can push through the United Nations. And at one moment in time, I'm pretty certain it will work, just
Yeah.
not instantaneous.
It actually seems to me that sometimes in periods of instability like we're in now, that these are the best times to propose the most optimistic and audacious solutions for the future, because it's hard to get people to think about things when everything's just going along fine. But
No, everything is fine. It's better to see us. Mhm.
so it
Yeah,
seems to me
I
that
agree.
this is the right time for this discussion.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect time, and that's a perfect time for many discussions. It's the time of new Yalta, new Tehran. It's a time to redesign the United Nations because I think they are very inefficient, and they are too bureaucratical, and they are not serving the purpose. They are not preventing the wars, and unfortunately. So I think this needs to be redesigned. The using of nukes needs to be redesigned, and in the spotlight of growing new superpowers, which is China and India, I think the humanity needs the response. It's in the common interest.
Yeah. All right. We're bumping up against time here. I'm going to let you go. I'm going to keep talking for a few minutes, everybody. But Ilya, thank you for being here. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week. Really
Thank you
great
very much.
conversation today. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks everybody for coming. Thank you.